Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. With a little more than a week to go before Christmas, the excitement is building for the big day. But along with the excitement, many are feeling the familiar tug of holiday angst, worry, and concern over how to meet expectations and make this holiday season memorable. Whether it's finding the perfect gift, preparing a delicious meal, or juggling family visits, the pressure to deliver can be overwhelming. So, how do we manage these holiday expectations without losing sight of what truly matters? Well, joining me tonight to provide some answers and tips is Vicki Hayter, licensed clinical marriage and family therapist at Emerge Lifestyle. Vicki, thank you so much for joining this important conversation.
Thank you, Harold. So glad I could be here with you guys today.
Sure thing. So let me share just a few facts about anticipation. Most Americans anticipate a relatively positive holiday season with plans to spend more on gifts this year, and that averages about $1,063 per person. Now, more than 50% of Americans admit concerns about inflation remain, and 80% of Americans report experiencing stress related to holiday expectations and events. Financial issues cited as a primary stressor by nearly half of Americans. But there are also concerns about the logistics of seeing family members. How is that done? Well, let me ask you this first and foremost. Overall, what role do you believe expectations play in creating holiday stress for families or couples?
Well, I believe the role that it plays is actually pretty significant. A lot of how we experience life is based on our expectations, which we develop over years from different experiences, what we've been taught, and it certainly plays a role in relationships.
Hmm.
So it has a significant impact on how we experience things. And a lot of factors come into play when expectations are or aren't met. And then they can lead to a big feeling of disappointment when they're not met.
Hmm. So, when you talk specifically about expectations and the roles that they play on stress, the holidays, ideally, are supposed to be a time of peace and joy and relaxation. But in trying to get there, it seems that it is counterintuitive. You're trying to do all of this work to enjoy yourself, but the work is so stressful.
Absolutely. It's interesting because stress can be good or bad, right? So the holidays is supposed to invoke a good feeling for us, but in the process of quote unquote getting to that good feeling, we do a lot. We set typically pretty high expectations of how things are going to go and what it's going to take and what it's going to feel like and how great it's going to be. And for some, that may not even be the case as well, just because there's loss and things that have occurred that have led up to the holidays. But the buildup of what is supposed to be a good stress feeling is not always the case. So there's a lot of anxiety around how to manage all these things before we actually get to the holidays. So you can imagine by the time we get there, many people are feeling so anxious or so overwhelmed or just exhausted and may not even have the capacity to truly enjoy the holidays.
Well, it would seem to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this anticipation may even start with early Christmas decorating or shopping. Sometimes that begins on Labor Day. I mean, I'm kidding, but
No, you're about right. You're about right. There are some remnants. Christmas and holiday are blending. Christmas and Halloween are blending now.
yeah, that is fascinating to me because if I look at my neighbors, for example, my neighbor across the street, she's not just a holiday decorator, she is a seasonal decorator. And so it it just goes from spring to Memorial Day to 4th of July to summer. She does the whole thing. And wonderful lady that she is, I just sit there and I watch her and I just get stressed out just watching her change her front, the front of her house. And this is no exaggeration, probably 8 to 9 times a year. But back to this point, is that where some of the stress and even in some cases anxiety really begins for this holiday season when people start thinking about it in October?
Absolutely. So I feel there's a societal pressure because you start to see all the displays out, and then it gets you in the mind of thinking what's going to happen. And some people start talking about this in therapy, usually around as early as late September, October, where they're going to spend the holidays. You will notice people start asking each other, "Oh, what are you doing for the holidays?" And they get you in the mindset of, well, what am I doing? And a lot of that involves where we're going to be, who we're going to be around, how much money do we need to say roll into Thanksgiving. That's one big expense where you're having a holiday meal, and then right upon the back of that is Christmas. So people actually start spending quite a bit of money right after Labor Day, and it doesn't get that much of a break as to time spent and money spent, plus all the other activities that are involved with those holidays.
Let's talk about children, for example. If you have young children, older obviously than toddlers, who are, for those who celebrate Christmas, and let me qualify that. For those who celebrate the commercialization of Christmas, okay? Let me help you with that.
Yes.
And you have young children who are aware that one of the traditions is that there will be gifts under the tree. What are parents dealing with as it relates to making sure that they meet their own expectations for their children?
Absolutely. I think it's stressful for parents given the climate right now around inflation, around our political scene. And people are already feeling a lot of anxiety this year as we built up to our election. And so I surmise that the anxiety is just rolling right on top of coming into the holidays. And with that, parents are probably feeling a lot of pressure financially, because they want to provide a really nice Christmas for their children, especially if they kind of set this stage of what Christmas is about. So it depends on your family. If Christmas is about gift giving, and we know that children have these expectations, they write out these Christmas lists, and it's our responsibility to talk to them about what they can expect around Christmas. And I like to offer up, within this idea of what you're going to spend for Christmas, we should also be talking about giving. And so for some people, that's also tough too. Giving is kind of the way in which they want to express love, and they want to let somebody know that they care, but we can give without having to spend a lot of money. And I think those conversations should be had with children from a giving standpoint. So it takes the emphasis off on so much getting, which then the parents can also set a budget around. Hey, you have this much money that you should be giving, and then maybe there's some you can spend for yourself. But we definitely need to be mindful of what we say to children around what this holiday means for them.
And which brings me to the next point. For how do you explain to a young child that perhaps a jolly old Saint Nick perhaps is not quite as jolly this year as he was last year, or perhaps is running out of reindeer oats, and so as a result may need to lighten the load that he drops down the chimney? How do you have that conversation with children and tamp down their expectations?
Well, I think you kind of said it as to lightening the load. It could be that we're sharing that Santa needs to deliver gifts to children who don't have as many gifts. So he will she's spreading this out because there are a lot of children who aren't able to receive gifts. And then you could even invite your child. Wouldn't you like to help a child who's less fortunate than you? So this whole idea of lightening the load, sharing the load, we might spin it that Santa also needs to take more things to kids who don't have the basics.
So another key thing when we're talking about children is not the parents' expectation, but grandparents' expectation. And I remember and was blessed to have both sets of grandparents for a really long time. And they were able to do in my day what comparably grandparents these days may find it a little difficult to do. So, is the conversation for the parent to the children about what they may receive from the grandparents, or is it a conversation between parents and grandparents?
I think that's both sides. I think what you're proposing here or you're asking is who should the conversation be had with? And I do believe that it would be helpful for parents to talk to their parents, meaning the grandparents, about, hey, things are tight this year. We don't want you to go all out. We want to make sure that you take care of what you need to take care of. So make sure that you're okay. So the parents should be talking to their parents about spending for their grandchildren. And I tell my children a lot, don't ask your grandparents. I know they're going to ask you what you want. I want you to be mindful, right? I want you to be mindful what you're asking them for. Is this something you really want and really need? What is fair, right? So you parents should be talking to their children about what they ask what they're going to ask the grandparents for or how they're going to respond, because grandparents tend to ask the children, what do you want? I know my dad has already asked my children, what do they want for Christmas? So I sit back and I listen and sometimes they don't know. And so I'm like, great, because later I'm going to have that conversation with them.
Yeah.
Be mindful, to be considerate, to remind them of how much their grandparents are already giving people, that they're there for them. I always ask, what do you want to do for your grandparent? Do you want to go just spend time, bake cookies with them? What would you like to give them? So it's not always about them getting, but also how can they give?
Interesting, because even as I'm listening to this conversation, I would imagine that the conversations during the holiday season that parents have, some parents anyway, have with their children about being mindful. Is that a difficult conversation to have with your children about being mindful, being aware of the realities of the season and expectation?
Well, mindfulness is a word that is actually pretty common to the upcoming generations.
Okay.
So I don't think it's that difficult of a conversation based on the appropriateness for the child's age, because these are words that they actually use now in schools. It's part of their social emotional curriculums out there, that we're being mindful, that we're being intentional. And so it probably is something for the parents actually to learn how to have conversations in a way that they are being mindful of their own spending, their budgets, and how we still create meaning and value to something that has been commercialized to a point where kids don't even get to enjoy what it really means, because there's so much frustration and tension and stress around the holiday. So if we take that back and we're mindful of the message we want to communicate about the holiday, you may find the children are just as acceptable and can enjoy it without all the toys and the things.
Hold on. We are going to take a break, but don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon. That's coming up next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We're continuing our discussion about managing holiday expectations. And of course, there are a lot of them. My guest is licensed clinical marriage and family therapist Vicki Hayter. Before the break, Vicki, we were talking about managing the expectations of children, particularly in the grandparent space. I want to move even outside of the conversation about spending money and about spending time when your clients come to you and they talk about the holidays. What other kinds of concerns do they have? Is balancing time an issue for them? And if so, what do they say?
Absolutely, Harold, you're absolutely right. We don't all, not only are we thinking about the financial pressures and the stress with the holidays, but we're also thinking about the social component of it. And with that, I might say the social emotional component of the holidays, particularly with couples, in-law conflict is still a very real thing, and it affects how we spend time in the holidays. And so these are conversations that I'm having with couples that I see around when there's conflict between in-laws, mother-in-laws, father-in-laws, typically mother-in-laws. Couples.
It's always the mother-in-laws, right?
Yes, believe me, there.
Father-in-laws are like, yeah, whatever,
Corner, like he good, it's real low key, but there typically is a little bit of conflict, and I might say a lot of bit of conflict sometimes around mother-in-law situation. So I've been having these conversations, in fact, a little bit before Thanksgiving around how the holidays spent, and it comes up in my couple session around where is some people are at the point where they don't go. They send the spouse and the kids, y'all have fun. But it still creates a little bit of conflict within the relationship, though, even though maybe they've done it like this for the last several years. And so we've been working on that, and that is setting realistic expectations around the who, the what, the where, when, how long. Given that there is conflict, couples have to talk about, is it a possibility? What are the possibilities for managing those expectations around who we spend time with, where we go? I was just talking to couples this first year, they'll stay home and not go travel to, say, their in-laws for the holidays, and what that's going to be like for them. And they seem pretty settled in it. But the beauty is they're having the conversation. They're talking about what the issues are. How should they approach it? There are different options, different ways that couples can manage to have some pretty good family time, even when in the midst of conflict. But so I offered to one couple who say the family's within driving distance, and typically the kids and the husband go and the wife doesn't. So we talked about what is the possibility. Are you open to, because they were going to host Thanksgiving, are you open to inviting the mother-in-law? And if so, how does that look, right? How much time is spent? Who interacts with who? How can you manage the emotions and the feelings that are there historically? How will you talk about what it's like for you when the person that you're in conflict with is in that space? And are there ways to counter some of that by what's going on in the environment? So the husband had to become more aware of, so when my mom is always doing this thing, my wife gets pretty upset. So how can he mitigate that, right? So they told me that the wife invited the whole family. They had a great time. Husband was aware and kind of was addressing things, making sure that he was providing like comfort for his wife and his mother in that space. They had a great holiday, spent 4 hours, went back to their places, and called it a win on both sides, in fact. So I think having the conversation prior to those set the expectations for how, who, where, how much time is going to be spent, and how they were going to get through it.
There obviously is a different dynamic when you're talking about separated or divorced couples and co-parenting.
Yeah.
How does that work when it comes to expectations, even under the best of circumstances?
Right. And you're right. When it comes to co-parenting, divorce situations where in particular kids are involved, part of that has to do with whatever the custody arrangement is. If people have, you have to talk about what the expectations are given those arrangements, and you have to adhere to them. And I think for those, when you know your custody arrangements, you also know how to set the expectation for how you're going to experience the holidays. So if your spouse your ex spouse, it's their turn to have the children for the holiday, you probably have an idea, or you should have an idea of how you're going to spend that time. You have to manage your expectations, your emotions. And if this is like the first of maybe one or two holidays where you are without your children, you build in some support for yourself. Make sure you go to spaces where you can enjoy the holidays, being able to talk to your children. Maybe you guys also set aside time that you get to say open gifts before that time. You get to create some special memories before the actual day of the holiday. I've also talked with couples about that who are in this space of going to spend their first separate holiday together. And it's a really difficult season for a number of people who are in that place where they're contemplating separation or have just separated. And now they have to figure out how to get through the holiday. So we're talking about conversations again, setting expectations beforehand. Let's figure this out beforehand, because children get caught in the crossfire when we don't have these conversations.
I would imagine that there are those circumstances that are not certainly the best, and sometimes things happen, whether it's airplane cancellations or delays. There could be weather situations. There could be health challenges or what have you. In your experience, what is the, obviously without identifying who they may be, but what is the most difficult situation that you've seen that just was not anticipated when you're talking about managing expectations for your for the people that you serve?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Harold. Right now, some of the most difficult situations are around couples that are in distress and are actually separating right at the point where kids don't even know that they may not be with both parents on the holidays. So they're at a very, very critical moment of trying to decide how we're going to tell the kid that we're separating. There's a lot of unfortunately, some very difficult times for couples, families that are experiencing their first holiday where they're separating, and they're really struggling emotionally to figure out what to do. And so right now they're taking, for some of them, we're taking it day by day, and we're talking about what is a way to bridge the gap in this separation period. So let's talk about how can you spend time, how can you hold it together enough to allow this to have a peaceful space. Maybe you can put things on pause as far as how you're feeling emotionally, making these decisions. And we had this conversation just recently. Making this decision right at this point is probably one of the most difficult things you can do. Is there a way to pause? Like if it's not critical, no one's being hurt physically, etc. Is there a way to pause this so that you can at least create a peaceful moment for the day? Right. And then come back to how are we going to figure out this separation?
But children, while they may not actually know, children are very perceptive.
Well, they are.
And they may not completely understand depending on their ages, but they may know something. They may sense that something here does not pass the smell test.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There are children that typically are very much aware, may not have all the details, but they sense that something is not right. And I've said this as well, and to the couples that I see, it's okay to help children understand we're having a difficult time, and yet we're going to try to enjoy this day together. We're going to try to enjoy this time. It's okay to acknowledge what they may be perceiving without giving all the details of what's going to happen next. Well, unfortunately, sometimes when you're giving too much, you leave kids with more anxiety about Is it today? And well, where you're going to be? Where am I going to be? They want to get all the details, and sometimes families don't even have that worked out. So if you can just say, I know we've had a tough time leading up to this, but we're going to enjoy the Christmas holiday together. We're going to, have dinner together. Mommy may take some time to go here and you guys will go there. So give them some idea that yes, while you may see that things have been difficult, we also recognize that we're working on the best solution. And in that, during this season, this moment, and celebrating the holidays, we're going to make sure that that we're here for you and that we can still enjoy this space together. And we'll come to talking more about that as the weeks pass.
What do you tell people about the importance of being able to say no? I remember years ago, many, many years ago, that when Oprah Winfrey still had her show, and she said she had to learn how to say no for a great many things, commitments, people wanting to borrow money, projects, time and the like. But it is very, very difficult to say no for so many people. How do you do that during the holidays?
Absolutely. How do you say no during the holidays is one of those things you have to give some forethought to. If you know that this is going to create a lot of conflict for the people you're going to be around or for yourself, you need to give thought to, is this something that I may need to say no to this time? Assess your own values, right? What have you committed to that is totally incongruent with your values? And you need to have those conversations up front. So, and that comes with kind of this setting boundaries idea, right? What boundaries do I need to set so that I can maintain my sense of peace, right? How can I manage this in such a way that allows me to still be nurturing or giving in the way that I want to, but without completely destroying the values and the boundaries that I have given forethought to for myself? I think about with families in particular, and the couple that I was mentioning, a lot of it had to talk through the boundaries. So I can have your mom in this space, but here are the boundaries for me. How can we work on creating that? So knowing what the no is, and the husband being, understanding that as well, that helps them to actually achieve that level of enjoyment in that space because they've already talked about it. So it requires some forethought to know when to say no. People get to the moment where they need to make a decision, and then they kind of just push past it and they do the very thing that they don't want to do. But if you decide beforehand and you have a script for how you're going to say no, I would like to be able to help you with that, but I realize I'm not able to do that in this season. Like for those, I'm a giver. I like to give. I like to give to a lot of organizations. I like to be present and show up. And I'm also mindful to all the things that I'm committed to. So when I take the assessment of all the things I'm committed to, I have to then prioritize those things. And the things that I know that I won't be able to make happen, I have to say no to those. But those things that I've assessed and I've said, I can still make this happen. And then I say yes to those. So prioritize based on the values and what your resources are will help you determine what you're going to say no to.
I think that is a really important point that you're making, because there may be people, organizations, even your church, your house of worship, or family members that may ask of you, and I'm not talking about financially, but they may ask of your time. And these are absolute, worthy, legitimate, well-deserving requests, but there's only so much of you.
Right. Absolutely. And in the giving season, if you will, right?
Yes.
We had Giving Tuesday. We've gotten a zillion emails from different places, organizations, And we want to give, especially to children's organizations, to people who are less fortunate, the vulnerable populations. And I think that is worthy. And if you really think about even beforehand, you could actually plan this out. This year, I want to make sure that I give to XYZ my time. This year, I want to make sure I serve this many hours for this particular organization. So if you could give a little forethought to that, you will find that you'll have an easier time saying yes to those things that you have already planned to do. And you will get, requests that are unexpected, but you will also have an awareness how much time you've already committed to other things, and you will know whether or not you can fit in the unexpected request.
Do you have any suggestions about dealing with blended families with varying traditions and the like?
Absolutely. And that's such a good question around blended families and how they manage the holidays. If you're a new blended family, this is probably a first time, and it can cause a little bit of angst around how things are going to be done. Conversations beforehand are super helpful, especially if you have to share custody, or your kids are expected to be, or you're expected to be at other places. I think what's hard for people is when you spring something on them, or expectations aren't clearly communicated. But if you are sitting with the time that you have, and you've had the conversations with the appropriate people, you can set the expectation. It doesn't mean everyone's going to like it, right? But you can be clear in communicating your needs and your expectations, but you also should be open to hearing theirs. And then you meet in the middle. What can be done? What can't be done? And we have to manage our own emotions, our own disappointment when things don't go as planned or how we would like them or hope for them to be. Because again, in blended situations, it's a little bit more complicated. There are more factors involved. And so having the conversations, communicating clear expectations, but also being willing to compromise and work with the others will give you guys a little bit more of what you want to experience during the
holiday. It really sounds like flexibility is really important in a time where everyone kind of wants things to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it, the flexibility, and we want things to be perfect because it's the season, right? So we want to feel the nostalgia of it. We want to remember, and we typically, we feel like I remember when the kids were little and we did these things together. And we have to be mindful that there is a way to still achieve a very enjoyable holiday, with the notion that if I can communicate clearly, let's share this time, let me be open, and let me also acknowledge that I'm disappointed when things don't go my way. Let me acknowledge that I'm really hurt by how our holiday season is turning out because we have this conflict that we're experiencing in our family, and let alone those who have lost loved ones, and it's going to be their first holiday season without that person there. So we have to be mindful, not just of our own emotions and feelings, but also those of others and those that will be involved in how we spend our holiday time.
Is it time for some families or people to put down the mantle of keeping up with the Joneses? That seems to be a constant pressure, whether it's gifts, decorations, those kinds of expectations. How do you convince someone to put that to bed? Does it? Wait a minute, we never ate on paper plates before, so why are you having paper plates now? Grandma always brought out the good china during our Christmas and Kwanzaa celebration. So, but now we've got red cups and paper plates. So
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's so true, though. That keeping up with the Joneses, is that not the age old, though? Like, how long are we going to do that? You got to be willing to go against the grain. You got to be willing to try something new. You got to be willing to revisit the values and expectations for the holiday. What is it really about? Yeah, it's nice to set out all the china and do all the things. And it's also nice to not have all the stress of doing all the things. So then why can't we just do something that makes it more enjoyable, more relaxing for everybody? Mm-hmm. What if we don't set out the china? What if we use plastic forks and any cutlery? What is it going to ruin if we do that? We got to revisit that. Why does it mean that much? Because the nostalgia of how it used to be, or because we get to talk about it and post it on social media so everybody can see it. And so that makes me feel what? Validated. What do you get from it? Because a lot of it is driven by what you're going to post for other people.
Yeah, that and that's I've forgotten in my own mind, because as much as I like social media, I also don't care about it. But there are some people who literally live and die by their holiday posts, and it can be problematic. Yes, it can be stressful, I think, for families who don't absolutely positively have it perfect.
Absolutely stressful. They go through so many takes on these pictures to get these posts right, but no one sees what was actually happening during the day on that holiday or when they took that picture, right? So would you rather create the image of, or would you actually like to live out the experience of what you post as so positive? I spend my time on making sure I'm experiencing what's positive versus what I'm taking all this effort to post, because leading up to that moment is often pretty stressful to create that image.
Mm-hmm.
And then people spend all their time looking at the comments. And I don't know.
And then the chicken is cold.
Right. Right. It's very interesting. It's like taking pictures with kids. They hate it, right? Because when you get the final, the picture that you go, okay, this is worthy, I can send this out. You remember how everybody was grumpy just before you actually post, like they snapped that picture well enough for you guys to not all look really crazy. It's not always like that. So I think we should be mindful of what we're experiencing versus the image of what we say or we want people to think about what we're experiencing. What is it all for?
That you just reminded me of something that happened when my daughter was, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years old. This wasn't during the holidays, but I think it was Father's Day. We took my father out to a restaurant, and she was, particularly grumpy about a photograph. And I'll have to look and see if I still have that photograph, but I have it in my mind where everyone was smiling but her, and she looked like a hostage because I mean, you look at that photograph and her face was expressionless, and you almost wanted her to blink if you were blink if you need to be rescued, because as you said, children are notoriously uncooperative when they are not feeling it, whatever it happens to be. I think I will, just for chuckles and grins, I'm going to remind my daughter about that. And maybe now that she is an adult, and closer to 30 than 20, I will ask her what on earth was going on in your mind.
That's a fun photo to bring out for the holidays.
Yes, let's just bring out to this this hostage photograph of you for Father's Day, dear. and remind you that someday when you have children, that you will be able to excuse them. I have a few minutes. just some final thoughts from you as it relates to, what do you want people to remember? What do you want them to know? Even taking from your own family experience and learning what will make the best emotional holiday as people try to navigate these difficult waters.
Yeah, that's a good question, Harold. I was thinking about just my own experience walking into my office today, and I sat down and I took a self assessment, just really quick check in with myself. I'm like, what are you feeling? And I was feeling like rushed, hurried, angst. And I'm like, okay, what is
Mm,
this? This holiday angst? What's going on? So once I sat with that, I said, I feel a rush. I feel angst. I feel a little overwhelmed from, I guess, leading up to the holidays and all the things that are going on. So first, you do a self check. See how you're feeling each day. Are you in a hurry a lot? Are you overwhelmed? Are you feeling sad? Do a self check first, because a lot of times if we're not aware of our own emotions, we don't know the vibe we're giving off, and much known to try to even be aware of others and what they're presenting with. So then we don't have space, we don't have the capacity to even acknowledge or be available for how others are experiencing the holidays. So self check. I sat there after realized I was feeling angst. I just did some breathing.
mm,
And and I'm thinking this is important. I'm a therapist, like I got to see people in a little bit. So I sat with it. I relaxed a bit. I wrote a few things down. It helped me settle into how to move through my day. So I encourage
wonderful.
people to do that. Do a self check. Where are you emotionally? Where's your headspace? Some people are feeling grief right now. They're feeling really sad. They're feeling disappointment. They're feeling stressed, anxious. And so I think you need to do that. And then you also do things that are going to help bring that down. Um, you want to do some breathing exercises. You want to use five senses grounding exercises where you're paying attention to your five senses. What can I see, taste, touch, smell, hear? You want to describe those things. Breathe along with it. It will help center you. You can listen to relaxing music. You can listen to uplifting music. What vibe are you trying to create in this moment?
Hmm.
Right?
I think that's an excellent suggestion, because if you check in with yourself, then it'll allow you to check in with the people who are in your immediate orbit as well. Check in with the spouse, the children,
Yeah.
as we lead into this holiday season. Vicky Hayter, thank you so much for spending some time with us and helping us make a happier, healthier, and less stressful holiday season.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here.
That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, December 17th. I'm Harold Fisher.